The tropical sun beat down on the stone streets of Stone Town, Zanzibar on August 25, 1896, but the heat was nothing compared to the fire burning in the heart of Khalid bin Bargash, because just hours ago, the pro-British Sultan Hamad bin Thwainie had collapsed in his palace after drinking his afternoon tea, and while the tea was still warm, the Sultan was cold and dead. Rumors whispered through the narrow alleys that poison was involved, but Khalid did not care for rumors because he saw only opportunity. "The throne is mine by right," Khalid shouted to his followers as they smashed through the palace doors, their boots echoing on the marble floors. He was 29 years old, ambitious, and tired of bowing to the British Empire. Within moments, the palace was swarming with 2,800 of Khalid's soldiers, a ragtag army armed with rifles, spears, and a fierce desire for independence. "Raise the flag," Khalid commanded, his voice cracking with adrenaline. "Let the British see that Zanzibar belongs to us." As the red flag of the Sultanate rose up the flagpole, snapping in the ocean breeze, Khalid stood on the balcony looking out at the harbor where the British ships sat like sleeping giants. He turned to his top general and said, "They think they own us. They think they can choose the next sultan like they choose their dinner. But today, we show them that the blood of lions runs in our veins." However, less than a mile away in the British consulate, Basil Cave was not impressed. The British consul was a man of strict rules and even stricter deadlines. He adjusted his glasses, looked at the commotion at the palace, and turned to his assistant. "Send a cable to London immediately," Cave ordered, his voice as dry as parchment. "Tell them Khalid has seized the palace. Ask for permission to use force." The telegraph lines buzzed with electricity, carrying the message across the ocean. The reply from the British government came back faster than a lightning strike and colder than ice. "You are authorized to adopt whatever measures you may consider necessary. The usurper must be removed." Cave nodded grimly and sent a messenger to the palace. The messenger trembled as he stood before Khalid bin Bargash. "The British consul demands that you step down. You must strike your flag and disband your troops by 9 a.m. tomorrow, or the British will open fire." Khalid laughed, a loud booming sound that bounced off the palace walls. "Tell Mr. Cave that we have no intention of hauling down our flag," Khalid declared, puffing out his chest. "We will not surrender to his threats." When the messenger returned with this defiance, Basil Cave sighed and looked at the harbor. "Very well," he muttered. "If he wants a war, we shall give him the shortest one he has ever seen." The next morning, August 27th, the sun rose over a terrifying scene. The British Royal Navy had maneuvered 5 warships into a semicircle around the palace. There was the HMS St. George, the HMS Philomel, the HMS Raccoon, the gunboat HMS Thrush, and the HMS Sparrow. Their massive steel guns were loaded, leveled, and pointed directly at the wooden windows of the palace, just 300 yards away. It was point-blank range. Inside the palace, the air was thick with sweat and fear. Khalid's 8,200 men gripped their rifles, but their eyes kept darting to the windows. "Do not fear," Khalid shouted, walking among them. "The British are bluffing. They would not dare destroy this palace. It is too valuable. They're trying to scare us." But down in the harbor, on the deck of the HMS St. George, Rear Admiral Harry Rawson was checking his pocket watch. The time was 8 a.m., 1 hour left. He turned to the gunnery officer. "Are the men at their stations?" "Yes, Admiral," the officer replied, saluting sharply. "Guns are primed and targets acquired." Basil Cave sent one final warning to Khalid. "You have 30 minutes, the note read. "Surrender now and your life will be spared." Khalid sent a reply back, filled with false bravado. "We do not believe you will open fire." Basil Cave read the note, folded it neatly, and sent his final reply. "We do not want to open fire, but unless you do as you are told, we shall certainly do so." The clock ticked mercilessly. 8:50 a.m., 8:55 a.m. The seagulls circled overhead, screaming in the silence. On the shore, thousands of civilians gathered to watch, holding their breath. 8:59 a.m., Admiral Rawson raised his hand. "Stand by," he bellowed. The gunners tightened their grip on the firing lanyards. 9 a.m. passed. Khalid's red flag was still flying. 9:01 a.m., silence. And then, at exactly 9:02 a.m., the order was given. Fire! The world exploded. The sound was deafening, a thunderclap that shook the entire island. The first volley of high-explosive shells slammed into the palace with the force of a freight train. Wood splintered, stone shattered, and the beautifully carved balconies disintegrated into dust. Inside the palace, the bluff had turned into a nightmare. "They're shooting! They're actually shooting!" screamed a guard as the wall behind him vanished in a cloud of smoke. Khalid bin Bargash, the man who had boasted of fighting to the last man, felt the floor shake beneath his feet. He looked out the window and saw his outdated ship, the HMS Glasgow, trying to return fire with its small brass cannons. It was a brave but foolish attempt. The British guns turned on the Glasgow, and within moments, shells tore through its hull. The ship groaned, listed to the side, and sank into the shallow water, leaving only its masts sticking out like broken teeth. Back in the palace, chaos reigned. The magnificent crystal chandeliers, the pride of the Sultan, exploded into a million shards of glass. The harem, terrified and screaming, ran through the smoke-filled corridors. Khalid stood frozen for a second, his nightshirt covered in dust. He looked at his guards, who were dying by the dozens as shrapnel tore through the wooden walls. The bravery he had shown the day before evaporated like water on a hot stove. "Get me out of here," Khalid yelled, grabbing a servant. "Where's the back exit?" While his soldiers were being blown apart, the Sultan, who promised to fight to the death, was sprinting out the back door. He ran through the narrow streets, his chest heaving, heading straight for the German consulate to beg for asylum. Meanwhile, the bombardment continued. It was a slaughter. 9:10 a.m., the palace was a burning ruin. 9:15 a.m., the main flagpole was shot away. A brave Zanzibari sailor, seeing the flag fall, ran through the hail of bullets. "The Sultan's flag must fly," he shouted, climbing the rubble to nail the red flag to a palm tree. A British sniper spotted him, and a single shot rang out. The sailor fell, dead, before he hit the ground, but the flag stayed up. The British guns roared again. 9:30 a.m., the shelling finally stopped, but the fire did not. The silence that followed was heavier than the noise. The smoke cleared slowly to reveal the devastation. In just under 40 minutes, the British Empire had turned a palace into a graveyard. At 9:40 a.m., the Sultan's flag was finally pulled down by the survivors. It was over. The British commanders lowered their binoculars. "Cease fire," Admiral Rawson said calmly, closing his pocket watch. "I believe they've had enough." The numbers were staggering. On the British side, one petty officer had a bump on his head from falling timber. On the Zanzibari side, over 500 men lay dead or wounded, their bodies scattered among the smoking ruins. The shortest war in history had lasted exactly 38 minutes. That very afternoon, the British brought their chosen puppet, Hamoud bin Mohammed, to the customs house. He walked over the debris of his predecessor's ambition and was declared the new sultan. Khalid bin Bargash, the man who would be king, was smuggled out of the country by the Germans, eventually captured years later and exiled to St. Helena, the lonely island where Napoleon Bonaparte had died. As the sun set on Zanzibar that evening, the British ships remained in the harbor, their guns cooling in the evening breeze. They had sent a message that would echo around the world. The British Empire does not ask for permission, it gives orders. And if you ignore those orders, 38 minutes is all it takes to bring your world crashing down. So, imagine you are standing in that palace as the clock strikes 9 a.m. You hear the gears of the British cannons clicking into place. Do you hold your ground for pride, or do you surrender to the power of the sea? Because history tells us that sometimes bravery is just another word for suicide.
Even when it meant a final shot.